All right, so I am working on a project for a client where I'm doing some keyword research, and I'm probably going to end up with about 20, maybe 30,000 keywords when it's all said and done. And it's just generating those keyword lists. And I need to get keyword difficulty scores for each one of those keywords. There's a few ways you can do that. The way I always like to do it, or the way I've done it in the past, is with SEMrush. So SEMrush has a bulk keyword tool where you can put in 100 keywords at a time, and it will give you back the search volume and the keyword data. But for 30,000 keywords, that seems like that would take me forever. Um, SEMrush does also have an API, but that is pretty expensive. And I was just playing around and realized that potentially I can um, build a tool inside of Google Sheets for this. And I can use a tool, an API called Data for SEO. So Data for SEO is a API tool. So dataforseo.com. Actually, I'm going to do this in another tab. Actually, that's fine. So dataforseo.com. So it has an API tool where it gives you a bunch of information. So you can get keyword data, SERP data, on-page data, some business data. And if you can understand how to recode and create your own tools, then you can do that. And it's actually pretty cheap per request, much more cheaper than using a all-in-one tool like SEMrush. And so I want to use this. I've tried to use data for SEO in the past, and the problem is I'm not a developer. I've taught myself Google Apps Script, which is like a version of JavaScript, to allow me to do automations inside of Google Sheets, but I'm not that great at it. It's just kind of hack through it, a lot of Stack Overflow and stuff like that. Lately, been using a lot of ChatGPT to generate a lot of code, and that works amazingly well. And I just realized, oh, I could probably figure out how to use data for SEO with GPT, and the GPT will build a script for me. So that way I can use the API inside the Google Sheet. So I played around with that a little bit and was able to get some pretty good results. And I thought before I go deeper down the rabbit hole, I've talked to some friends of mine and told them about a lot of the code stuff that I'm doing. And they were like, yeah, I would love to know how you're doing that. So I wanted to create a video to kind of show that process and break that down, show how to deal with errors and things like that. So how do you create code within GPT, ChatGPT, and specifically how do you create code that uses an API? So I got four steps in this process that I sort of outlined as I was sort of playing around with this. So one, you got to create the initial prompt. And that initial prompt should have details of the sheet, of the spreadsheet. It should have information about where you want the response placed, and some sample code as well so that it knows what to do with it. And we need to tell GPT, we need to understand the response that comes back from the API. So we need to log that response. So sort of we're creating a code, we're telling AppScript, hey, go to Data for SEO API, send this request, and then log the response that you get back from the API, right? With that response, with that log, now we can then go back to GPT and say, okay, here's the response I got back. Now here's what I need to get out of that response and place into my Google Sheet. So hopefully that'll make sense here in a bit. But the first thing is we got to create that initial prompt. So for that initial prompt, I'm going to play around. So one thing is we got to use GPT-4 for this. GPT 3.5 works too, but GPT-4 works great. So if you can pay the $20 a month, use GPT-4. And then it does help to know the code a bit. So if you don't know the language that you're trying to create in, I'm sure you can still do it, but it's just hard to like debug if errors are there or know what the errors mean. Um, Again, that may not be an issue because you can just tell ChatGPT, hey, I got XYZ error, and it does a pretty good job of fixing it. But it does help to know like what you're looking at, especially if like GPT goes off on the wrong path, to be able to see where they went off the wrong path, say, hey, in this section, you were supposed to do this, but you did this. That's super helpful. So it helps to know what code language, it helps to know the language at least a little bit. You don't have to be an expert. If you've taken a beginner's course in a language, I think that's probably good enough. And then use GPT-4. We're not going to use any plugins, but use GPT-4 if you can as well. All right, let's see. So let's start with creating this initial prompt. So here's my sheet. I'm gonna rename this tab data. And basically what I want is I want keyword and difficulty score. So this should be a score from 0 to 100. So if I put in a bunch of keywords here, so SEO, backlink, technical, SEO, it should put difficulty scores, SEO difficulty scores for each one of those. So first thing is I want to create a prompt, and I want to create a prompt that has some details about the sheet. That's sort of the first step. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so we can see it. All right, maybe a little bit smaller. All right. First thing is, is going to say, sort of the first thing I'd like to start with is like the goal. So I need to create an app script for Google Sheets. This I'm pointing out that it's going to call the Data For SEO API. Depending on the API that you use, like if it's, GPT is using data prior to 2001 or 2021, excuse me. And so if it's like an older API that's been around for a while, it should have all the information that it needs, or it should have, like I said, a lot of context. If the documentation is publicly available on the internet, then it should have a lot of context available. I think this thing that we're doing, this keyword difficulty score that we're getting from data from SEO, is actually sort of one of their newer things. I don't know if Google Sheets, excuse me, ChatGPT is going to have that context, but no need. We'll give it the context. I'm just saying it's helpful to put the name of the API because they may have some context around it. So the script will call the Data For SEO API and get. So right now I am explaining the details of what's in my sheet, so that way it knows what data is in there and where to place it. So I say I have two columns in that sheet, a sheet named data, and I'm giving the data type. So column A is text, column B is a number. With this script, so with the script, I need to look at each keyword in column A, starting in row 2, telling it basically like ignore row 1, right? Because that's sort of my header row. I'm going to change up this a little bit. I need to. That's okay for now. All right. All right. So with this script, I need to look at each keyword in column A, starting in row 2, and get the keyword difficulty score from the Data For SEO API. The score should be placed in column B. All right, so I think that explains what I'm trying to do. Now I need to give it, actually, before I do that, um, you know what, I'm gonna take a step back because this is giving a lot of information that I don't necessarily want it to have right now. Because honestly, what I actually want right now is just to log the response. Um, so I'm gonna take that text and save it somewhere. So let's start with login response. Um, before giving you the final request. All right. So here's simple code for a Data for SEO API request. I need you to convert this to app script. Be sure to add a log for the response back from Data for SEO. So I need to get some sample code for them. So in their API Explorer, the code that I need is in their labs. So this is um, one of their newer APIs. And then I need to generate, like I said, like some sample code. So I'm gonna go to it's asking for some information. So search engine is Google, function is bulk keyword difficulty, and then ask for location, language, and then a keyword. And so now if I make that request, actually before I make that request, actually I'm gonna make that request to see what that looks like. I don't know if you can see it. Let's see. Okay, so here's the response. So this is all the JSON code that they responded back with. And then you can see, let's see, we can see the difficulty here. So here's where the keyword is SEO. It gives me a difficulty score of 100. So that's actually not what I need right now, though. What I actually want right now, I could potentially give ChatGPT this request or this response and say, here's the response, extract the keyword difficulty score. I know that I've tried that earlier today and that didn't work. The response is actually different. So that's why I actually want to get the actual response that comes back from the API instead of relying on this because this documentation isn't updated. So I'm actually going to get a code example. And that code example gives me some options. So I can choose the tool that I want to make the code or the language. So this is for curl, but I can choose PHP, Python, JavaScript, C Sharp, Java. Like I said, AppScript is a sort of a remix of JavaScript. So I'm gonna use JavaScript as a request, but if it didn't have JavaScript, I could probably use any of these and it'll work just fine. Um, we just need to tell it that, hey, this is Python or whatever. And then the way this code works is that it has it'll input some login information that's encoded. So I'm going to put in my login, my API login. So all right, and then you can see here, it made this additional line here with this encoded information. All right, so here is now my code. So now I can copy this code and then place it in here. All right, so now I have my initial prompt. So I need to create an app script for Google Sheets. The script will call the Data for SEO API and get the keyword difficulty score for each keyword in a list. Before giving you the final, I'm just say first, I want to give you a sample of the not the response, a sample of the or let's say first I want to give you a sample of the response we'll get back from SEO Data for SEO API. To do that, I need you to create a code to send a request to Data for SEO API. Okay. And so here's a sample code for Data for SEO API requests. I need you to convert this to app script. Be sure to add a log for the response back from Data from SEO. All right. So now I'm going to ChatGPT. I got GPT-4 turned on. I'm going to drop that in and let's see what code comes back. You can see, so it says, because again, I was using JavaScript. So it uses this code you provided uses XML HTTP requests, which is not supported with AppScript, right? However, you can use the URL fetch app, right? So it's taking one language, converting it to another. And then the response is log with the logger.log method. All right, so that is done generating. So I now can copy that code and I'm going to go to AppScript, extensions, AppScript. I'm going to copy paste that code in and replace what was already in there. I'm going to save it as Data for SEO keyword difficulty script. And then now we should be able to try this out, see if this works. So we're going to go ahead and run this. First thing is I got to give authorization for it for Google. Click advanced. So it's going to come up with this message because you haven't verified this app with Google. But no worries on that. Just click advance, go to, and then click on this link to go to the project unsafe, and then hit allow. All right, so that worked. That worked perfectly, actually. So first thing is it started. You can see the log down here. So it's execution started, and then this is that log of the request, the response. Excuse me. You can see where it says keyword difficulty 100. So that worked out perfectly. So I'm gonna copy this, and now I need to create a new prompt, my next prompt. So remember that prompt that I was doing in the beginning that I took out. I'm gonna put that back in. So now in my Google Sheet, I have a sheet named data. In that sheet, I have two columns, column A, text, column B, number. With this script, I need to change this up a little bit. I need an app script created to look at each keyword in column A and get the keyword difficulty score from the Data for SEO API. The score should be placed in column B. And then last thing I'll put is, here is a sample response from the Data for SEO API. Oh. All right, so now I'm going to grab my prompt again. Oh, excuse me, my response. Place that in. All right. So now that let's see how that works. So we'll copy that. We'll paste that into the same thread. So that way it has a little bit more context. And we'll see what code we get back. All right, so it's looking at now that response and it's saying, okay, based off that response, here's sort of the way I need to be able to get that score. All right, so now it's building up that code. I've done a ton of app script code work with ChatGPT over the last month or so. It's pretty amazing. It's like scary amazing how good it is. Things that would, like I said, I'm not a developer, I sort of hack at things that would have taken me days to figure out, maybe even weeks or months. Um, as long as my prompt structure is set up properly, and I can sort of understand where the errors are and give it information on how to handle those errors, it has 10x the speed at which I can create these things. It's unbelievable. All right, so I'm gonna copy that code. That's all done, and I'm gonna create a new one just so we save this other one. Never mind. I don't need it. We already got the response, so no, I'm gonna keep it. I'm going back and forth just in case I need it. All right, so script, create new script. This is going to be called request. All right, so we'll do the same thing. And then we'll run this function, this get difficulty function. So we have some keywords in here. We got 3 keywords in here. And then let's see if we get the get difficulty scores out of those. So we run that. It's got some new sort of scopes and things like that that's being added. So you got to give it permissions again. All right, says it's done. Moment of truth. Look at that. Got them in there. Really cool. Really cool. I mean, again, that first of all, I've tried to use data for SEO. Again, I'm not a developer, so I've spent hours trying to use data for SEO for years. It's not a complicated like thing. It's just I'm not a developer, so it's hard for me to get it right. And I've been using like they have JavaScript, but they don't have app script code. If they had app script code, then it would be super easy. But they don't have app script, so it's like trying to like parse out, JavaScript and move it to app script or using Python or something. And it's like I don't know what I'm doing. So I've spent hours trying to build something like this. I've ended up like using other tools that had a little bit easier API or something like that, but I've always wanted to use data for SEO. And like, we just did that in no time. I'm curious if I sort of do a bunch there. What does that look like? All right, so I got about 100 or so, 105 or so keywords in here. Let's see what that looks like. So I'm gonna run that again. I just realized something that this is doing one keyword at a time, but this API is actually a bulk API tool. So it actually can get 1,000 keywords at a time in a single request. So it did this fine. But I wonder if I can change this up to send 1,000 up to 1,000 rows. So let's see. How do I want to adjust this prompt? I would love for it to be able to, like, if I had 10,000 in here, like, I would love for it to be able to, like, take 1,000 batch, send it off, take 1,000 batch, send it off, right? Um, Maybe let me sort of build that list. All right. So I got 2,500 in here. So I wanted to send 1,000 at a time instead of going, because right now it's just going SEO, it's sending requests for each one of these SEO, backlink, technical SEO. And I wanted to go through, you know, A2 through A1000 and just send that as one request and then go through A1001 to A2000 and send that request. So let's see. How can I do this with a prompt? So first thing I'd like to say, okay, this worked great. I so instead of a single request for each row, I want to send requests. Give it a little bit more context. This API. Um, I'm sort of going to start all over again, right? So I'm going to start all over again like we did before. Um, so if you remember our initial thing, we gave it sheet details, we said where we want to place it, and then we gave it some sample code. So I'm going to re-give it some sample code again that has a batch request. Um, so, oops, not the request. With the code example, we'll get JavaScript. So that way you can see, okay, how are you doing the batch? So you can see here, like it has this array here for keywords. So SEO, backlink, technical SEO. So I want to give it like a sample there. So that way it knows what to do. So I'm gonna say, here is a sample code for a batch request. And you all right. So this worked great. I like to give it positive feedback. So I would like to make the following edits. This API actually has the ability to take a batch of 1,000 keywords and respond with keyword difficulty scores for each keyword. So here is a sample code for that batch request. So again, it has the 3 keywords in there instead of 1. And then can you create an app script to log the response? All right, so we're gonna throw that into ChatGPT. All right, so it sees that difference, string separated by the n, which is what we saw there. So now it's going to do that script, the first script that we built. It's going to redo this now, and it's going to update this to show that new array. So let's see. All right, so that's done. I'm going to copy that, paste that in. We'll run that, and let's see if we get that response back. All right, so here's now with the response back. So it says the 3, it didn't give the score though. All right, so it gave a keyword difficulty of null. That didn't work. Why did it do that? I'm gonna go back to this and see what it's supposed to look. Well, it did the same thing here too. Maybe it doesn't work as a batch. Oh, comma as a delimiter, not um, new line. So sorry. I see here it says you can specify up to 1,000 keywords by using a comma as the delimiter. The keyword should be at least 3 characters long. So that's where I made the mistake. Is I created a new line instead of that. I'll create that code example again. Now, if I do that request, it should come up with that number. Let's see. There we go. So now backlink 100, SEO 100, technical SEO 88. Great. So now I'm gonna get that code. Say I did that wrong, right? And then we'll try it again. So I'm gonna say, sorry, but I actually gave you the wrong sample. So here is the correct version. So you see, like I said, you kind of need to know what you're looking at in terms of the language. Like if you never used JavaScript or AppScript and you saw this, like you wouldn't know why it wasn't working. You would just keep plowing through. So you gotta kind of need to know somewhat of what you're looking at, right? Again, you don't need to be an expert, but you just need to have some sort of um, experience with it. So now I'm going to paste this correct version, and now I'm going to send that back to ChatGPT. You see, we're kind of it's literally like having a conversation with the developer, right? Hey, developer, I need you to do this first and then do this second, do this third. Oh, sorry, developer, I gave you the wrong information. Here's the right information, right? It's the same thing that you would have with your in-house developer, your freelance developer or whatever. All right, so now see it switched that up. Now it has that comma delimiter instead of that new line, that /n. So now we copy that code. Let's try that out. So save, run. We got the response, and now we got the keyword difficulty scores. Great. So now I can go to the last step, which is, so I created the initial prompt again. I've logged the response from the API. Now I can create the final code. So I can say, great. Now, so I'm gonna say, here is the response I got back. Use this to create the new app script code to place keyword difficulty scores into column B. So now I'm gonna copy that response, place that in there, throw it back in the ChatGPT. All right, so again, figuring out how to get that data out of there, out of that response. So I'm gonna create the code. Like that it does comments too. And actually I have done it where I've like taken some code that I've edited or maybe has minimal comments and I say, hey, I need you to go through this and like add more details to the comments, and it'll go through really each section of a code and add comments, which is really nice again when you're not a developer and maybe it takes some time to figure out what you're looking at. So all right, so I'm gonna update that request script that I made earlier, place that in there, and went from with the new code, it went from 37 lines to now 51 lines. So added that new stuff in. And so now we should, oh, I forgot actually one step. I need to update this so that way it does it actually in batches. So if I have 1,000 keywords, it should do it in batches. So I want to be able to do 2 through 1,000, 1,001 through 2,000, so on and so forth. So I'm gonna say I need one additional edit. I want to do this in batches of 1,000 keywords, for example. If my column A has, how many keywords do I have in here? 2,500 keywords. It should send 3 requests. Request 1, 1,000. Request 2, 1,000. And I'm going to say A2 to A1001. A1002 to A2003. I think that's 1,000, right? A2 to A1001 is 1,000. A2 1,002 to A2003. Oh, so I did get that wrong. So A2002 to A2000. A2001. Oh, it's the same. Okay, never mind. All right, so A, and then request 3, 500, for example. A 2002 to A 2501. All right. So I need one additional edit. I want to do this in batches of 1,000 keywords. For example, if my column A has 2,500 keywords, it should send 3 requests. It should send 3 requests. So request 1 has 1,000. Request 2 has 1,000. This should be done on the same script execution. So that way it doesn't like think it has to run 3 times. All right, so we'll make that edit. So again, to make these things will take me days to try to figure out for loops and all this other stuff, right? Like ridiculous. Honestly, there's 0 chance I could do it. I would probably be able to do this first part that we did, where it's like the single, where it's like every line gets a request. That would take me a day. Maybe I can do the batch. Maybe. Like it would take me forever. Um, it didn't create the script though. Thanks for clarification. Oh, the script above is already designed to process the script in batches 1,000 times. Does this by incrementing. It's registering process 1,000 times. This is a batch. So it has 25 cents for 3 requests. Okay, so never mind. It already did it. So I actually didn't even have to do that, which is great. So I'm going to copy that code again. Again, GPT is just, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna run. Let's see. This works. I already had some data in here, so I'll just leave it as is. It's fine. So now that's running. I wish I would love to have a log in here that says processing batch one, batch two, batch three, just to see where it's at. But it went through and it did it all, and that did it amazingly fast. So yeah, if I got 30,000 keywords, like I'm gonna buzz through that with no problem. Some things that we're think about, if you're using like a personal Gmail account, that there's limitations to how long a script can run. So with a personal Gmail account, I think it's 6 minutes. If you're on Google Workspace, like your company Gmail account, then that is 30 minutes. So just keep that in mind. It may time out on you. You may have to like rerun it again if it times out on you. But yeah, I mean that's amazing. I'm gonna run it again, just delete everything out, run it again, see what that looks like. So started at 9:04 and 6 seconds. So again, I got about 2,500 keywords in here, and I finished at 9:04 and 17 seconds, and it got all of that information. Crazy, crazy information. Like I said, so much more cheaper than like SEMrush's API or whatever. So let me know if you have any questions, or if you want some help tech setting this up or for yourself, or have questions about using ChatGPT to create code. Thanks.